Detroit, New York City, Albany, Rochester, Buffalo, you'll find a fusion of jazz and hip-hop. The rhythms in from the bright lights of NYC to the falls of Niagara. Every corner, every town, we're all connected, brother.
I heard a chuckle back there. Welcome to the New York Space Business Roundtable. I hope you enjoyed that. We're going to have an update to that little bug soon, but anyway, I hope you all enjoyed it. Today, we are wrapping up 2024 with a look forward to 2025 Mojo or no go in commercial space. This is going to be a really kind of a deep conversation, the kind of conversation you can expect here on the New York Space Business Roundtable. I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping for us. We are here in this space. This is going to be an interactive space. We have a robust panel that will be exploring some of the concepts that we're hoping to dig into. However, our audience is on mute. That said, we would love to hear from you, and you can contact us. Throw us your ideas, your questions, your thoughts in the chats. We are watching for those ideas and concepts and questions and ideas. So please do take advantage of using the chat button. We will be running until 1:15. We'll take a pause at 1 o'clock for just some very quick announcements, a little bit before. And then at 1 o'clock, we have a big question. Haven't done that in a little while, but we're going to do it today because it's that kind of day. And so with that, I'm happy to welcome to the stage Mr. Lou Zaccarilla. Hi, Lou.
Hey, Tamara. And, you produced that bug. I don't know if everybody knows that, the opening bug. So congratulations. And I didn't know we were going to get a new one. Look forward to that. And welcome, everyone. Welcome to the last New York Space Business Roundtable of the year. Happy holidays to you, wherever you are. Happy Christmas if you're in the UK, like our first guest today. Also, happy International Dark Sky Week. Yeah, this is the week when we take a look at making space dark again, so to speak. We appreciate the astronomers and weather people and others who organize this week. So, let's keep it dark, but let's keep putting things out in space as well. George Orwell, obviously famous for a book called 1984, was asked once how we can preserve human freedom through journalism and platforms such as this one. Orwell responded by saying, we must capitalize on the liberty we have, the liberty we've got, by telling people things they do not want to hear. Well, in our last roundtable of the year, we may not tell you anything unpleasant, but we will be rubbing against our industry's need to perhaps do a few things to keep moving forward. They include making the marketplace and innovations coherent enough for the investment community to actually understand. This includes the public sector as well. We need to look at our image. If you ask people outside the industry about satellites, they will tell you that many people will tell you they're controlling people's thoughts or are flying over New Jersey this week by the hundreds or worse. This connects perhaps to the ethics of our industry and the need to clarify and be more transparent. And also preparing the markets, the media, and civilization for a great change to come, which commercial space will be a key part of. And we are going to make the world a better place. We insist on that, and it is true. It's a lot to ask of 1 hour and 15 minutes, but we started last month at Clyde & Company with our live roundtable. So we're going to finish with a bang today, as Tamara said, especially when you look at who is on the program. So before we get to that, let's get going and do a few things that we need to do. Of course, one of them is to thank our sponsors who have been with us, Deruva Space, Satshore, Luxembourg Trade and Investment all year. And we really appreciate their support. Monarch and Clyde & Company also have been supporting us recently. So we really appreciate the people who put the food on the table, the intellectual food. We also thank our supporting organizations who are with us and who help promote us through the year. Special shout out to Space News, who sends one of their terrific reporters to us every month. And of course, World Teleport Association, the great trade association for the ground segment of our industry, which is also undergoing change, and everyone else as well, including New York Space Alliance. And you'll hear from their founder at the end in our New York Minute. Jason Rainbow, we have our significant digits segment. I'm going to give you an opportunity to obviously contradict or to confirm or to obviously report on what you're reporting on this year, that obviously were nuggets in the storylines that either advance some of those ideas or obviously relate back to what we want to talk about today as well, which is where does the commercial industry head? How are perceptions to be changed? And where do we go from here? It's a lot to ask in those few minutes, but as I said, we were not going to make anybody feel uncomfortable.
Oh, no, interesting, powerful video. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, interesting, dynamic question. These authorities that be, who are they exactly? Because, we're seeing so many rapid advances in AI. Perhaps AI will be the authority making these decisions about humanity's future and the not so distant future. But yeah, as it relates to the space industry, lots of uncertainty clouding 2025 and beyond. But I do think there are good times ahead for space because of the underlying factors driving demand for space capabilities. They're not going away. If anything, they actually seem to be increasing. And for me, in the areas I write about, two positive things I'd mention. First, direct to device. Not only have we seen rapid pace of technical evolution this year for technology that would enable satellites to provide connectivity directly to standard smartphones, whether they're iPhones, Android phones, or whatever. But I think that the regulatory machine behind this is moving faster than many expected. The FCC recently gave SpaceX the go-ahead to provide what will be, at first, text messaging services in cellular dead zones across the US in partnership with T-Mobile, which has just opened registration for testing the service early next year. And there are other companies eager to get their own approvals here, so that's a positive for them too. And this is significant because analysts talk about direct-to-device having the potential to be a market measured in the hundreds of billions of dollars. There are mixed views about that, what will actually people actually pay for, but it really opens up the addressable market for space companies in a way that's unprecedented. And can I speak to the video a bit? Space has the opportunity to really facilitate social mobility in the world. Think about giving the unconnected the ability to talk to their doctor, in a remote rural region, or access to education, or to play a part in their government. So, there's a lot of good that space can do. But for the space industry, the second thing I'd mention, so that was on the commercial side. But for the government, we're seeing just so much demand for defensive capabilities. The US government is already a massive contributor to the revenues the space industry generates. And analysts I've spoken to so far believe the next Trump administration is going to put that into an even higher gear. There seems to be a lot of optimism around that at the moment. So overall, the technological ecosystem continues to mature, and also alongside that, the financial support systems are becoming more capable for sustaining business in space. So plenty, I think, for the space industry at least to be optimistic about in 2025 and beyond. Yeah.
Thank you. And we're going to obviously broaden the discussion. We've got someone who can speak to the ethics of this. We've got someone who's building the infrastructure for this. I mean, it is a great complex human story, isn't it? And the fact that we can tell it and tell it like it is here is really what it's all about, because we're I think to borrow the cliche, at an inflection point. I want to ask you this though, Jason, based on your reporting. We've got Redwire with us today. We'll have Rick Tumlinson with us today, who's invested in about 20 companies. When we talk about the Mojo, the ecosystem for this commercial industry that is moving forward, do you see all of the pieces in place? Was there some area in your reporting where you said, I think we might have to sort of pick it up here a little bit? in order to get where we want to go? And I'll ask this question of the other guys too, but I want to get your take on it as a reporter.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a completely rosy outlook. The underlying trend seems to be positive for most of the space industry, but we've seen setbacks this year. I'm thinking in the launch segment, we've seen quite a few failures. ABL Space Systems kind of pulling away from the commercial launch industry to focus instead on missile defense programs for the Pentagon. I think, is a kind of signal that space remains tough and hard, and the ecosystem is coming together and it's maturing. And these companies that were once startups trying to figure out a market are becoming more established and forging real partnerships with others in the industry, which helps the overall sustainability of what everyone is trying to do. But it's not easy, yeah. And the uncertainty that I mentioned in 2025, that's also something that could delay progress. So investors, I know most investors in an uncertain market would maybe try to pause what they're trying to do, just waiting to see how things shake out before placing long-term bets. So that could be a factor that kind of takes the industry not backwards, but just kind of slow things down a bit when we've seen so much rapid evolution recently.
Yeah. Yeah, uncertainty is interesting, right? Because I think, what we were hearing on that TED Talk as well is the uncertainty of where we're going to go, where this is all going to end up. My view is we're human beings. We'll end up where we usually end up, with flares of greatness, but also disappointments. And that seems to be the nature. Maybe we'll change it. We're going to ask the panel. Jason, early part of 2025, will you be looking at any startup companies? Will you be looking at anything in particular in terms of your reporting?
Startup businesses. Well, I can't really call SpaceX, Starlink a startup, but this is really the start of commercial direct to device services for a little bit different from what Apple and Globalstar have been doing with their iPhone space enabled SOS emergency alerts. This would be giving connectivity to all smartphones that are already in people's pockets. So that's really testing the waters about just how real this market opportunity is going to be. Is it this $1 billion, is it finally giving space an opportunity to tap that $1 trillion plus terrestrial telecoms market that we hear a lot about? Or do people just not really care about streaming Netflix on a mountaintop? We're going to start answering that question from early next year, perhaps.
Yeah, they do care about educating their kids. And as you say, that's one of the benefits. And about keeping themselves healthy. The Globalstar Apple deal, I mean, they're doing that deal has become a bigger deal now, right?
Oh yeah, they're doubling down on more investment. Yeah, they're not really saying much about what they're doing, only that they're improving and extending the service somehow. So yeah, that's another data point to show that there is real activity and substance behind whatever this is going to be.
Okay. Jason, I really appreciate what you do for us through the year. And I hope, and I know you've got a little one there for Christmas who you're trying to convince that Santa Claus is coming. Go to sleep. Good luck. And thanks so much for all you do.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
All right. And I hope you stick around today. We'd like to thank Space News, as I said, for helping us get Jason here. Now, let's get into today's panel because I really think we've got a group of people who are absolute superstars. And let me introduce them to you and we'll jump into this. And again, feel free to use chats to ask them questions. First up, we've got Jonathan Bailiff. John is an operating partner at Genesis Park and the chief financial officer at Redwire Space, where he chairs the audit committee. Prior to this, Mr. Bailiff held leadership positions at Genesis Park Acquisition Corp. And Bristow Group, where he served as president and CEO. As a younger guy, he served over a decade in the United States Air Force, flying F-4 Phantom fighters, and he participated in the first Gulf War. He sits on several boards, but I want to shout out his role on the board of the Alley Theater and Georgetown Graduate Schools of Foreign Service. John, welcome back.
Thank you very much, Lou. Really pleasure to be here. Always excited, and we always get new panelists with with obviously a year behind us from the last podcast I did here. So I'm excited to talk about, obviously, I can talk about my own book, but I can, Redwire and our pretty substantive year, but it's always interesting to see how it interconnects with everybody else.
Well, and we'll be doing that. And again, thanks for showing up. Tim Fernholz has been with us before as well. He's a journalist based in Oakland, California, and the author of the 2018 book, Rocket Billionaires, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and the New Space Race, which makes a perfect holiday gift and stocking stuffer, as Joe Fargnoli reminds me. Tim, welcome back. It's great to see you again.
It's great to be here with everybody. It's a very exciting time in space world. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Likewise. And the book will fit into a stocking. Will it not?
You get the paperback, or if you have a sufficiently large stocking.
Yes, in the second or third printing now as well. It's a sufficiently large stocking or Bigfoot. Okay. Next up, someone who's new to the roundtable, Professor Michael Tate. Professor Tate is a research scholar for responsible technology, innovation, and policy at Princeton University's Faith and Work Initiative, as well as a lecturer at the Keller Center for Innovation in Engineering Education and the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. He draws from an interesting background, interdisciplinary, in law, design, ethics, religious studies, and much else. He's held academic fellowships and lectureships at Yale, Harvard, and l'École Normale Supérieure in France, in Paris, actually. He probes ethical frontiers in the industry, and obviously there's a reason he's here today. Includes regulation and the intersection of science, religion, and culture. He also advises corporations on brand equity, communication strategy, and trust building in an era of accelerating technological change, and asks the question, are we saved or slayed? Michael, welcome to the roundtable.
Yeah, thrilled to be here. Excited to learn from you and with you. Thanks for having me.
You bet. And finally, back with us again is the legend, the rebel and respected leader, Rick Tumlinson. Rick is one of the most influential people in the space field who helped coin the term new space and is credited with helping create many of the elements we see now in our new commercial space industry. His vision of our future includes helping to break the government monopoly on space and pave the way for today's commercial space industry. He influenced pioneers Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and others along the way as he began to pave that path. He co-founded the Space Frontier Foundation, where he signed an historic agreement, like the first ever commercial data purchase of note. Mr. Tumlinson is also a recipient of the World Technology Award. He launched Space Fund, a venture capital firm, which is investing in 20-plus space companies, and he serves on the U.S. Space Force Doctrine Advisory Group. His article, Mars Next, and All of the Above, actually appears in Jason's magazine in the December 13th edition of Space News. So I think you should check that out. He's also got a book coming up, which we will also talk about a little later. Rick, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. I did want to mention one challenge I have, and it's so we've got this guy who has created a technology which beats everybody else. He is in complete control of it, basically, essentially got a monopoly. He claims to be helping people all over the world, and he's interfering with astronomy. Meanwhile, his reindeer are dropping all over the planet while they're flying, hurting the atmosphere. And yeah, the Santa Claus dude. I mean, we really need to address that. It's a real problem. I'm just saying. Okay.
Okay. No, I hear you.
Serious stuff,
It is. Are we doing anything about that?
I told you it was controversial, Lou. I warned you.
Yes. Well, we're going to find out what we can do about this clause in the clause. Okay. Well, listen, everyone, if that's not enough for you Yankee fans, well, let me ask you a question. If you're a Yankee fan, with this lineup today, who needs Juan Soto? Of course, Jonathan, you're a Mets fan, so I think the Mets do. Michael, let me start with you. Okay, let's get into this. There is a convergence or a conflict at the moment between ongoing commercialization of space and some of the ethical boundaries, which Tamara led us off with, that are being crossed as the industry explores, builds, invests, and dreams. And we dream big here. What are the fault lines in this transformation that we need to be mindful of Can you kind of layer that for us a little bit?
Yeah, great question. Great icebreaker too for everyone involved here. Let me just sort of set some context and offer four very quick thresholds that I see. And these aren't necessarily ranked or prioritized. They're just, I think they're almost banal to the point of being instructive. Uh, so I teach a course here at Princeton called the History of Innovation, History of Entrepreneurship to the undergrads here in the engineering department. And the way that I decided to do it is I broke the class into industry sectors, and then within each industry sector, we sort of divide into two. The first part is we engage in key legal decisions, key policies, key actors, key historical events and technologies that kind of have led to the current state of affairs within a given industry. To lead to the second part is we bring in a guest who's innovating at the edge, really in a problem space or an opportunity space. And for the space uh, industry, the way that we set it up in terms of bringing in the discussions about what the new space economy are dealing with is this beautiful image of, the overview effect. We start there, then we go to the image of the clustered mess that's in space right now with all these space debris. The estimates range from 10,000 to a trillion, depending upon the size counts. And then the third image is a collection of trash heaps scattered all over the seas and all over the planet. And the point that I want to make there is we start actually with some literature on the type of socioeconomic markers and even character markers of people who litter. And yet we have, supposedly anyway, some of the best technologically prepared and educated minds who, from the beginning of their designs, didn't consider the waste problem. This is a species problem and the way that I want to talk about it is in this concept of responsible design. And that is from the very beginning, we need to think about things like the waste challenge and also the light pollution challenge. Remember the good old days when you could look up into the sky and see the beautiful stars, the beautiful planets and moon only, maybe a comet and so on every now and then. But the point that I like with the waste problem is that it's one of these material reminders. Like I tried to, I think that message from the TED Talk was important to lead us off. But I think we also need material reminders of this problem. And that is no matter where we go, even to the edge of the universe, we're forever ourselves. And
Yeah.
for whatever reason, we just keep on stumbling over this waste problem, you know, and so the first one, and this will be the longest one to discuss there is the waste problem and the mounting Kessler syndrome. That's an issue. And the window, if we don't fix that on space exploration, could be shutting rather quickly. Another one that I think is important too is just to pay attention to the language and the vision, the guiding metaphors that we use when we were talking about space.
Mhm.
I think here of the moon speech by JFK, right back in September in 1962, when he has this incredible ethical awareness where he mentions breathtaking pace of progress ushers in new challenges, new ills, new problems, new dangers, and new ignorances. Just so aware. And
Yeah.
then yet he says, with this moment of triumph at the end, he says, just as this country was conquered, so too shall space be conquered. And it's like,
Right.
are we attuned to what we're actually talking about when we use this language of conquering space as this
Interesting.
country has been conquered?
Yeah.
This is what I want to call the militarization challenge. And then a lot more quickly, things like the privacy challenge. We're gonna be facing privacy challenges that are just we haven't solved the early stages of these already. And so when we're starting to talk about the incredible telecom advances that are going to arrive from this, I mean, think about the leapfrog technology of the mobile device in Africa, how that's just revolutionized the continent and how that's revolutionized economies in so many respects. We haven't solved the privacy challenge is terra firma. So how are we going to expect to begin to think about them in any kind of social, critical, responsible way when it comes to space? And then finally,
Yep.
this sovereignty question to me is an important one.
Mm.
This merging of nation states and businesses or corporations. The antitrust bit was already brought up on the Santa Claus decision there. But that's a real issue is this antitrust issue and the sovereignty challenges with, I mean, just take, for example, I don't know how you begin to evaluate the new space economy. You have 500 billion, you have a trillion, You have 16 Psyche and asteroid mining at 700 quintillion. I mean, so somewhere between 500 billion and 16 quintillion or 700 quintillion. I don't know what happens if any of those are successful at the level of antitrust, at the level of corporation and nation state divides. And then, of course, everything front of mind for me these days is the energy challenge. And I just point to the great work of Vaclav Smil, the energy historian. So the waste challenge, the militarization challenge, the privacy challenge, the sovereignty challenge, and then the energy challenge, I think are
Yeah.
the thresholds I'm paying attention to.
Thank you. I mean, that opens it up quite a bit for us. It's a lot to unpack. We're not going to get to it here, but there's a reason I opened with George Orwell, Michael. So thank you for that. Great setup of the table. Jonathan, let's bring it a little bit down now to the actual construction of where we are now, because Redwire is doing it better than anyone, I would dare say. It's a work in progress, as we all know, but you guys, are building the infrastructure. You've made great strides in the innovation and deployment of it. Remarkable, actually. To many, this signals that we really do have mojo for future investments, that as we begin to sort out the things that Michael has been talking about, we will have a there. Where is Redwire overall as we head into 2025, and what are the primary elements missing to enable it to achieve the goals that you guys have set, and of course the financial targets?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, and thank you again for having me. In many ways, Redwire is a bellwether, an indicator, both in terms of how we announce and work with our commercial, national security, and customers in the what I call the civil space, ESA and NASA. So we end up are being a bit of a reflection of where the overall industry is in two very particular ways, and 24 is literally the poster child of it. First, we've been around decades, right? Redwire, people keep thinking that we're new space, and there's an element for sure on our innovation side, which I'll talk about, that has new space. But again, we have a lot of our equipment that was on Apollo. We've been on the shuttle. But again, as a third tier mom and pop supplier, with each of these individual companies that now are fully integrated, and there's 10 of them, and they're global, and now they all work together for the betterment of our clients, and our shareholders too. But we always generally focus on our clients and our employees, or what we call our galactic citizens, first. So when you look at 24 and say, okay, Redwire was built with heritage, i.e. 10 companies that have been in space for decades, many decades, and then the innovations that we bring to the table for our clients that Rick has called new space. We are in essence a reflection of where the industry is, but a little bit writ small, right? We're expecting to grow revenue today in 2024 approximately 25%. Historically, we've grown 20 to 30% organically, but less than 4 years ago, we were sitting at 40 million of revenue, and we expect over $300 million of revenue this year. But importantly, it's what we're doing in space that matters, because again, I do care about the video we saw, and I do hear it both from investors that are still very focused on ESG and how space can contribute. And what I tell people is the same thing. We're doing it for Earth, right? As much as there is an exploration angle,
Right.
If you really look at the budgets, the exploration of the moon and Artemis, and if you look at what we're doing in Mars, the budgets of NASA and ESA's budgets have increased for a 3-year budget cycle, but NASA's have decreased, and we're still growing. And why is that? It comes down to commercial space. And when you then look at our numbers more specifically as a public company, we're very transparent. It's because we're growing outside of the United States also. In the last 3 years, we've taken revenue percentages of our civil space down from over 50% to less than 30%. Our commercial space has gone from less than 25% to over 50%, and national security has gone from almost nothing, 10%, to almost a third of our revenue. So when you look at what we've achieved in 24, we are reflecting a number of things that Michael has already spoken about, and I know the others will too, which is if you're diversified and you're a reflection of the overall industry, you can be successful. Because right now, I'll just talk about the products. Right, we've launched more solar panels. We have 27 different wings being built right now across the ISS to Inspire satellites for Thales, which many of them are going to go into Japanese communication satellites, to we just did our first acquisition in almost 2 years of Hera Systems. It's a small acquisition, but it gets us in the proximity and very high spec mobile satellites, primarily for national security, with our Mako Thresher lines, which then join our Hammerhead lines. You can tell we're renaming these products for a reason. These are products that are meant to be mobile and to be able to work in space for our national security clients, but they will have commercial uses too, to service and refuel satellites as part of their proximity. So
Never stop swimming.
Yeah, exactly. And that's innovation plus heritage. But also, and I think the thing that I'm also very proud of is last year, this time, I talked about one drug development that we were working with Eli
Yes.
Lilly. And obviously we don't make a lot of revenue. It's less than 15% of our revenue. We've invested over $60 million in what we call the pillbox, which is a protein crystallization development for the pharma industry. And I'm proud to say that we have gone from one, and we even forecast that maybe we do 16, to now we're doing 28 different drug developments on the ISS right now, which will better all of us on this call, but also beyond, people who think like what the videos talked about, that space is a hostile environment to the development of the human spirit and health. So for us, we're very proud of being able to do that. There's a million other different things we did. You don't grow revenue the way we have without a number of other products, but I'd rather yield to my other panelists. But that's what 24 is about. I didn't talk noticeably about the stock price. Yes, the stock price is up almost 380% from the beginning of the year. But I view that as a scorecard on the reflection of there are haves and have-nots in the industry, where this is the great thing about capitalism / American capitalism, is that the better you do, the lower your cost of capital. So you get on this virtuous cycle. Now, that doesn't last unless you continue to produce real results, revenue growth, profitability. We are now profitable down to EBITDA, but the truth is we're lumpy, and the space industry is lumpy as a public company, and that public investors want to see more consistency. And that's the number one as we go into 25. And you're not going to get consistency without some level of scale. And so we've talked about being much more lean forward on the M&A front, which we have a tremendous capability in.
Okay. And obviously you've got the experience there, so you know what you need and where you want to go. Diversification is key. And you've actually done even better. Thank you for mentioning the pillbox, because I know when we spoke at the Luxembourg Space Agency event, you weren't talking about those kind of numbers. So
no, it was only one for Eli Lilly. Now we've been signed up with partnerships with Bristol Myers Squibb, Acessa Libro, and those are the ones we go public with, right? There's others that, for lots of reasons, there's competitive dynamics here that we haven't been public. We try to be as transparent as we can, but we've signed up Butler University, so we're working both in the nonprofit but also the profit on the pharma side. Look, to stay in microgravity for months and maybe even a year with these drugs is not possible on Earth. And these protein crystals are very critical to large molecule therapies. Many of these large molecule therapies, which are used in oncology, have tremendous side effects. And many of the drugs that we're trying to create protein crystals that will alleviate these side effects or improve the deliverability and efficacy can't be built in 1G Earth. But with launch costs and then return costs coming down by literally orders of magnitude, this can get done just like a generic drug can be made in the Philippines and delivered to Chicago. And we're going to do the same thing with drugs on the ISS that can be delivered to New Jersey.
That's great. Thanks, John. Rick, you just heard about one great company, diversification, but he's also talking about some lumpiness. As an investor, as the space guru, what part of the ecosystem are you most anxious to see develop further? And is Redwire sort of, getting there in a way that you'd say, yeah, this is where we need to go?
Yeah, I'm badly trying to control my ADHD right now because everything that was just said, I've got like 10 different things to launch off of. But look, I think the moment that we're in right now, and Jonathan is exactly right. These sort of products, what you do in space, right? There's way too many quote unquote launch systems out there. There's going to be a die off a massive die-off coming. We've got rocket ships. And by the way, I use the word ship to differentiate from rockets and launch vehicles, because you don't throw ships away. And we're moving to the era of rocket ships. And 1,000 years from now, they're going to look back at this moment and they're going to go, this was the automobile, the train, the plane, the steamship, all in one, or as I like to say when I'm saying this on stage, this is when the Vulcans, show up and say, welcome to the Federation, as we break out. That's about to happen, right? I had a friend of mine point out to me, he said, Rick, 26 by 56 cylinder. What the hell are you going to do with it? That's the version of Starship that now they've already expanded.
Yeah.
But that 26 feet by 56 feet. If you're in a room and you have one of these Apple or maybe it's on a Google phone too, whatever, where you can do measurements, do those measurements and just get a feel for what that volume is, because that's what's coming. And so I think the biggest challenge we're about to hit is we're going to have an overcapacity of being able to go to space. Because Elon's going to be launching his Starlinks, etc. If you believe 1/10 of the number of what they're projecting, 400 Starships a year, let's say 40 a year, that's more in volume going into space than we've ever done before. And what's happening is people are sitting back, waiting for this change to occur. I think the wise investors are starting to get involved with the companies that are going to take advantage of that capability and that volume, right? Because there's a lag. Once you start that company, once you start that project, you've got 4 or 5 years before you're ready to fly, right? And so they're going to start flying, and then everybody's going to be, oh my God, I've got to ride to space. Let's go. Well, then you're going to be behind the curve. So I urge people now to get involved. And by the way, it's really important for me to say this. Commercialization to me is a euphemism for the first steps to human settlement, because it's more acceptable to say commercialization. I threw a conference in DC in 2015 where we had 100 people trying to get to the word settlement, and try and get it into the national lexicon. And so it's really important to understand that. That's what I'm about. The reason I did a VC fund was because I believe in it, but I had to put my money where my mouth is and walk the walk. So I think we're in that moment where it's time to take advantage of what is about to hit us, because everything's going to be different in 5 years. Everything.
Yep. No, that gets right into change. Settlement's better language wise, I'm sure Michael would say, than conquering. But Rick, when you say get involved, what does that mean right now? Get involved. I mean, Redwire's involved. I mean, there are people involved. What does that mean in 2025?
In 2025, getting involved would be finding those companies that you believe, based on standard business basics, because the standard business basics don't change in space. It's like, it's not like, ooh, it's space, I don't have to balance, we don't have to come out in the black or whatever. No pun intended. But we're looking in Space Fund, and I'm stepping back from Space Fund, I should say. I'm letting other people, it's at a certain point, companies become around about spreadsheets, and I'm a space guy, so I'm moving on a little bit. Other people are running it. But we're looking for companies that are going to utilize. In fact, almost every company in the Space Fund portfolio met the test of what we call frontier enabling, or a frontier company. In other words, it participates in, supports, or utilizes what's happening in space. So we don't do telecoms. We don't do things like that. Those are all great. Those are important. But these are things that lead to opening the frontier. So I would start looking at that. Also, I had a conversation with somebody yesterday. I've kind of been yelling at my friends in the space advocacy community. I get on stage. I'm like, guys, ladies, you've been sitting out there talking about this great future that's going to come someday. It's freaking here now. What are you doing about it? The Mars Society, for example, love them, whatever. National Space Society, all these groups, right? Love them to death. But now they're going to have to transition. They're basically becoming obsolete because it's time to move from cheerleading to organizing. I mean,
interesting. Yeah.
I'm interested in, and this is why commercialization bothers me, and I'll shut up after this, that this is bigger than commercialization. This is the expansion of life and humanity beyond the Earth. And what I'm looking at now is self-organizing groups like the Pilgrims, like the Mormons, like groups. These are not going out for commercial reasons. They're going out for belief reasons. And then they create economic entities by where they go and what they do.
Right.
And those groups need to start. I want to see one of them roll into, let's say, Gwen Shotwell, who runs SpaceX. Well, Elon's pretending to be in the government. She, I want to see them roll into her office and say, here is our settlement. Here's our community we're going to build. I'll use the moon. It's not the most hospitable place, but as we know, people go everywhere. People live in New York City. What, right?
Okay.
No, I lived there, so I'm just kidding. But it's a matter of
only
I don't know
really
if people
smart
call New
people.
York. Yeah, I was going to say New York.
only really smart people.
I don't know if you'd call it a settlement anymore. It's not.
Yeah, I know, but talk to a Bedouin about New York City, and they're going to be like, "What? How could you do that?"
Yeah, right.
But the point is that we go everywhere, and I want to see them roll into like the SpaceX office and go, "Okay, we need 10 flights starting in 2035 to put our first construction materials down, and then bring resupply once every 6 months to our community on the moon."
Got it.
And to get there, you have to start now.
That's the okay. So you got to get involved that way.
Either way.
Tim, Rick's, of course, has just laid out a vision for us, as he's want to do, and it's always coherent to me. But there's still this fuzziness around space. It makes for great headlines because of the billionaires involved that you've written about. But does it yet make for good investments? Is there still a perception that the industry is more of a hobby than a business, or have we just knocked that whole notion down in the last 30 minutes?
Well, I don't think we've knocked it down entirely, but I guess I would frame it a little bit differently. We're at a really interesting inflection point in the space economy, as Rick and Jonathan have been talking about. And I think the things that are billionaire hobbies, I think the good news is that most people can't invest in those yet. But the things that are publicly investable are businesses like Redwire, where you have companies that are trying to generate revenue by doing stuff on Earth or to benefit Earth, or to blow up things on Earth more often than not. And so, we're at an interesting point where we saw this huge surge of technology development and investment in the 2010s. We saw the COVID recession and companies SPACing out and going public. We saw a lot of those companies not make any money and in fact lose a ton of money. And so now we're at a point where, in I would say the last 6 months, the private investment world is starting to turn around. The founders and the VCs that I talk to are getting more interested in putting money back into space in a way that we haven't seen in maybe 18 months or so. And public companies, we're seeing the winnowing, and we're seeing potential winners emerge. Forgive me, I don't think any of our SPACs are cash flow positive yet, but some of them are approaching on adjusted EBITDA basis. Am I wrong, Jonathan?
We've been free cash flow positive for 2 quarters and 1 LTM, and operating cash flow for 3 of the last 5. Trust me, the last quarter we were -20, so no one is bumping chests and high-fiving at Redwire, but we did achieve it a bit ahead of the SPAC forecast.
You're down in the red zone now.
Progress. And I think those are the companies that are exciting right now because, if you look at Starship, obviously Rick has given us the real hard sell on Starship, and it's exciting, it's cool to watch. But I think about a company like Vast, which has a ton of money thanks to its billionaire backer, and said, you know what, we are going to take advantage of Starship, and we are going to build a huge space station.
Vast is a partner of
and not going to be flying for several years, and they've had
that's right. And Vast is a part. We're partnering with them, right? Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
That's great. But they've had to scale back because Starship is not going to be delivering cargo for them for many years. And so I think if you're an investor right now, you really need to think about, if you are predicating your business model on frequent reusable heavy lift launch, when will that really be available? And who knows? I don't think it will be available for several years, just based on the commitments that SpaceX has to itself with Starlink, to the US government, and just the wonderful world of rocket development is not easy. So I think, we are in an exciting place. The public companies are giving us transparency to show that there is a possibility to make money here, but your SpaceX's and your Blue Origins are very opaque and extremely dependent on that lumpy government funding. And so the other thing, obviously, to talk about in 2025 is what is space policy going to look like? And I think folks are very excited about Elon having the ear of President Trump. And I think people are excited about Jared Isaacman. But I would just point you to what's happening in Congress right now. I think we're hearing a lot of desire to cut spending and cut taxes. We're going to have a very tiny congressional majority. And I would be shocked to see NASA funding go up a lot next year. And I would suggest it might go down a lot. There's talk about canceling the SLS. That might give NASA a little more space to roam. But I do, and yeah, but that's still not enough money to go to Mars, say. And the other thing to keep in mind is, referencing the TED Talk we saw at the beginning of this, and, however we may feel about those views, one of the things that has made space very successful from a government spending point of view is that it is nonpartisan. Everybody can find a thing to like about space. Now that SpaceX is kind of a partisan company, I'm very curious to see what those congressional funding discussions are going to look like. And I just wonder if the world's richest man is asking Congress for how many billions of dollars for a mission to Mars at a time when we're cutting taxes and cutting other spending, how will that be received? So I think the space community needs to think hard about how, if we're breaking a government monopoly, doing that without government funding.
Interesting. Yeah, I can hear that argument in the next political campaign. So you're going to cut my Social Security so we can take Starship to Mars. That'll go over
good,
well.
I think, for the space community, if that was the line.
Yeah. Guys, we're done with the first segment. We're going to come back with a big question. We're going to be talking about human behavior in all of this as well. Before we do that, though, I've got to turn to my colleague, Joe Fargnoli, for our New York Minute reaction. Joe, I mean, this one was unbelievable. I told you this was going to go.
Great
like
lineup. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I thought really Tamara did a great job of starting us out with Ruha Benjamin's TED Talk presentation on Are We Saved or Slayed? I think she really laid out one of the core knotty issues about space and how people perceive it. And I'm really glad that we were able to bring that to the forefront. Michael Tate, I thought, did a great job of describing the issues behind responsible design and giving us a historical perspective of the incorporation of technology. Just spectacular, because we rarely think all the way through to the end when new technologies come forward. And I believe that with experts like Michael, I think the space industry can really take a step back and think holistically, because as we described, we're at a very serious inflection point for space right now. And I think when we look at all those factors that were mentioned, we really can take a deep breath and try to do this properly. And, on the note of doing things properly, I really love Jonathan's discussion about Redwire. I'm just very thrilled to hear about their progress.
Yeah.
I've been around Redwire for a number of years, working with a few of their companies, and they've made some really smart acquisitions. And I think have had a very definite vision. I really respect their long-term vision and their pragmatic steps. So it's really a pleasure to hear of their progress. And as Jonathan described, their view of how space helps ESG, how space actually is not working against the interests of humanity, but working, towards the interests of humanity. Over to Rick. As I told you, Rick was a grand slam hitter, and he certainly was here. I liked his discussion about breaking the government's monopoly on space. I would just add that I don't think the government really wants a monopoly on space. I think they're ready to hand it off to commercial when and where it makes sense. And, as Rick mentioned, we're going to face this overcapacity in launch. And I really love the way he described this idea of the new problems or the new opportunities / problems that presents. The idea of, just as we had a group of folks in England decide to cross the ocean and find a new place to live under a new set of principles, can we is there a rationale for reconstituting, humanity's, organization on another planet? That's a very interesting question that Rick brought up. And again, his long-term perspective in space, really focused my attention in an idea of going from cheerleading, which is a lot of what we've done in this roundtable, to organizing, right? To really pragmatically organizing what is that next step and how do we help to accompany and facilitate groups who want to self-organize and take up this unique opportunity. And as Rick mentioned, it's going to be, you need a 4 or 5 year vision at least, because the infrastructure is coming around. It's not there yet, but it's going to be here, and it's going to take it that long to get it ready. And then I love the way we kind of wrapped it up with Tim. You know, Tim gave a very pragmatic, down-to-earth set of considerations for the political and budgetary realities of where we are. You know, we're at a great point right now with this launch capacity being available and this administration, again, being very pro-space. And I'm going to be following Tim's feeds very closely here to keep an eye on what is that political budgetary environment going to look like. And I really appreciate his description about VAST and doing private space stations as an example of you know, a commercial venture in this area. So a great lineup. I really thank everybody for joining. And as usual on the roundtable, you know, we try not to be one-dimensional. We want to look at the holistic issue of the evolution of space. And I just couldn't think of a better group of panelists than what we had today, Lou.
Yeah, I wish we could go on for another couple hours too. We got 15 minutes left, Joe. Thanks. You know, 1 o'clock, I hope you help me. I just want to jump into the idea of a coherent cultural or social rationale for this settlement idea as well. Because remember, Columbus was sent over here to bring Catholicism to the New World as much as anything else, but there was this whole commercial element behind it, right? Will we have something similar? I wonder. It's a hell of a question to ask. But before we do that, Tamara, we've got a few things to talk about. We got to clean our house or keep our house in order, however that phrase goes. Thank you, Joe.
Yes, thank you so much. Yes, we do. And so shall you or shall I? What shall we do here?
Go ahead, why don't you start us off?
Okay. Yeah, so folks, you know, we've talked about this before. I just want to say this again. SSPI is very happy to have created this program, Space Business Qualified, which allows us to take a broad look at the space and satellite business. That is to say, we all come into the industry in this area or this other. We might be investors, we might be engineers, we might be marketers, lots of different ways we might enter the industry. But to get a broader understanding of the industry, Space Business Qualified is here to give you a very easy, affordable, and accessible way to do online self-guided study and gain understanding of the broad business of space. So we encourage you to check it out, Space Business Qualified. We have opportunities for companies to sign up to assist with their onboarding. You can sign up yourself as an individual. We would love to have that conversation with you. And Lou.
Yes, next year, the roundtable is going to go quarterly. And we will be having February, May, and August and November on our schedule. And some of those, I think all of those are going to be live, are they not, Tamara, and streamed?
Well, that's the goal. They will definitely always all be streamed. We're actively now looking for hosts to have them be hybrid events. We had a really fantastic experience at Clyde & Company last month, where we did a hybrid event that some of you were there for, and it was a really exciting and interesting panel. But the real action was after the lunch break, where we had a Chatham House rules conversation, where we got into what we always like to say, a real New York conversation. It gets real when the cameras are off. So that's our goal, is to really be able to engage on that level on a regular basis. So stay tuned. We'll be having more information about that.
Yeah, we'll have more for you on that.
See what else we have. Oh, okay.
Okay. Is this the last slide?
This really is the last slide. This is.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, this was a simple one today. So we, because we have a lot to talk about. We are nowhere near finished.
Right. Okay.
Lou.
Yes. Back to me.
Back to you. Yeah.
Okay.
Shall I turn the camera? Shall I turn the screens off?
You can. Yeah. We've wished everybody happy holidays, and that's an order. You have to have a happy holiday.
Yeah.
All right, we're at the top of the hour now. We're going to ask the big question of our panel. And the big question is, are we using space to run away from some of our problems on Earth? And they can be business problems that you address here, economic problems, problems of menace or threat of what we've done in our societies, or maybe, spiritual issues that we're not confronting, or something on the positive side. So we're going to sort of broaden this question. Rick, I know you've got a new book coming out about spiritual principles, I believe. Am I right?
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Are we running away from something? Are we going to be more of ourselves or less of ourselves?
Yeah, I think we're
We're
running.
going to be out there.
I think we're running towards something. One of the great questions I'll get sometimes in front of a college audience is, why don't we wait to go into space until we've grown up? And I love that question. It's a layup for me, because I say, well, when did you grow up? Did it happen before you moved out of the house, or did it happen because you moved out of the house? Right. And that's the question we miss, that we're missing here. The book it's called Why Space, The Purpose of People. And Michael, we're going to have a conversation, my friend. And it's basically the other side of me. It's the philosophical, spiritual side. I lay out in The Purpose of People, there are 3 principles: to protect and expand the domain of life, to honor and evolve human civilization, and to explore and experience the universe. And my question in the book is, can you imagine a civilization that is maturing as we go out there, that lives by those principles? And it's like, we want to save the earth. I love that, but I was going to say Trump, forgive me. I was going to trump that by saying, what about butterflies on the moon, trees on Mars? Let's expand life, the domain of life. And then honoring and evolving that lady who gave the TED talk.
Yep.
I love
Ruha
having
Benjamin.
conversations. Yes. I love having conversations with folks like that, because there is a misdirected historical rear view mirror looking approach that we often get from people. And it's important because it's a warning as to what not to do out there.
Yeah.
Right. But a lot of it doesn't apply. We're not going to take over the moon from the little moon people, who are much chagrined to find out that we're claiming them as part of our empire. This time, if we do it right, we can give it to everybody. This time, if we do it right, we can share it with everybody. And I'll end with that, in that one of the narratives that's out there regarding, for example, Jeff and Elon in particular. And by the way, I've had the dialogue with Gwen Shotwell, about Elon, you tell him to shut up. No, you tell him to shut up. It's like, just build the freaking rocket, and get out of the rest of it.
Yeah.
But the point
So
here
you wanted to get
is,
out of politics. Is that?
yeah, it's like, get out of it. Just get out of
ahead.
this X
Okay.
thing. Get out of all of that. That's graffiti. We don't care. 1,000 years from now, they're going to judge you. I had the back and forth with him on X about that a year ago. But the point is that I know where those two are coming from, and their ideals are high, and they are believers in humanity, and
Yeah.
their spirit is that way. They are dysfunctional in different ways. You may not like their companies, you may not like their politics, etc.
Yeah.
But I think that going
Let
to
me-
John's point real quick, and I'll
Yeah,
wrap
another
up
minute,
my-
Rick, because I want to get on to Michael.
Yeah, I want to
and
wrap
Tim and
this
John.
up with John. John is talking about this device that can make all these medications you need. To me, that I want to say that allows us to talk about the end of the beginning, because the end of the beginning to me is when you have groups of humans going out into space that have all the manufacturing capabilities they need to exist independently, 100% of the Earth, on board or within the communities they're building. They can make their own medications. They can make their own food. They can make their own materials using the energy and resources of space. And suddenly you have an independent, non-blackmailable group of people living in space. And what we need to make sure of, or I believe, is that there is a morality, there is a level of understanding and spiritual direction within those people when they become independent like that.
Got it. Thank you. Michael, again, human beings are a bundle of contradictions, rationalizations, and then these angelic glories and flares of great depth and beauty and creativity. I mean, we're going to take all that out there. Frank White keeps saying there's got to be an internal change, right? You've got to have an overview effect that's also an internal effect. He's actually speaking more about love than anything else now in some of his work. You spoke about language, which is a cultural thing. What do we run toward when we go out there that is transformational, that will make it better for the species?
Yeah, beautiful.
There's a softball question, huh?
No, that's a beautiful question. I think to answer in just a phrase, the question you posed to Rick, mine would be, of course we are, and that's why we must go. And the reason I say that is because I think there's something special that happens when you make that kind of launch, wherever it might be, whether it's, I love the historical analogs. I think that is such an important, underrated tool in these sort of unrealizable technologies or ventures. It's so important to press on these historical analogs, and what the Mormons did heading out west is pretty remarkable, both in terms of the simple things like infrastructure and the railroads and all that, and the land squabbles with Lincoln. I mean, it's all there. You can just start thinking about what happened with the Mormons, Lincoln, and the railroads. You can envision property right disputes on the moon and and Mars and everywhere else. It's really quite extraordinary. I think of it in two directions, though, Louis, and I'll be as brief as I possibly can on this. I think of that great line from that 1970s song by Gil Scott-Heron, Whitey on the Moon. And I think the line is, "A rat done bit my sister Nell, but Whitey's on the moon." So that's one side, this extraordinary things that are happening going off to space, and yet you have Gil Scott-Heron's wonderful criticism of that. But then you have someone like Steven Pinker with that book, Enlightenment Now. And by every statistical measure, life for nearly every single human being has improved drastically. Now, that's difficult to talk about that because that's in terms of percentages, and a lot gets lost in the wash and in the net. But there's something about those polls about when you, as a species, as a civilization, as a nation, as whatever that institution or collection might be, attempts to do something great, it somehow moves everyone forward. Now, the difficulty that I see is that within that leap forward or that filter that moves forward, people are caught in the wash, and there is an incredible amount of risk and there's an incredible amount of harms that are introduced, but the net is always some kind of progressive move. And what I think, again, just in terms of historical analogs, I'm not sure we know how to deal with loss and how do we deal with harms in a way that's going to allow us to do it as an optimal strategy or an optimal way. I mean, you think about, for example, recent wars, the loss of life is tragic, but the loss of life during warfare has been by orders of magnitude decreased, and yet these are talking points as if to shut the whole operation down and to criticize its very merits. That may well be, but I think what all I'm trying to point out here is that if we're going to make this big leap forward, which I think we must, and I think I'm an ethical inevitabilist, it's going to happen. So how should we do it? One of the issues that I don't hear talk about enough is we have to think about this harm question, and we have to think about those who are going to be lost in the wash and what is acceptable in terms of, and I'm not talking about, we don't try our best to offer goods and services and remedial care, but how do we allow how do we allow progress to go forward and not be hampered by this unrealistic vision that everyone moves forward? That to me is the riddle.
Yeah. So building that ethical foundation so that, again, the least among us are brought along to go with the old mandate. Jonathan, you can approach this in one of two ways, and I leave it up to you. You can pick up on that whole ethical element because, again, that's part of what Redwire is doing. I mean, you guys have your own belief system there in terms of the way you're progressing. Or, you can talk about Pillbox, which by its very nature will do some of the things that Mike and Michael and Rick have talked about. What's your take on this? What are we running toward? You're on mute, John.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
Field.
I of course, I'd rather listen than talk. But we have already spoken about pillbox. The only thing I would say is, this idea of using space to, run away from our problems. If you really look at the space economy writ large, again, I get back to my original comment. The exploration dollars are minuscule right now. I mean, yes, there's a lot going into launch, which benefits that exploration. But if you really look at where the investor dollars are coming from, where a lot of the government funding is coming from, and I'm really also thinking about the global nature of getting in the game. We're not running away. I mean, if anything, you're seeing more people get on the bus. The Middle East has a tremendous amount of surplus, and they're really significantly investing in space. You see Europe feeling behind, and some of this might have national security elements to it, which means you have to run, towards space. And look, I'm not going to get into the ethical issues of whether you're solving the Earth's problems by having national security observation and operations in space. It's inevitable. I will say this, though, just from an ethical standpoint. Generally, having gone to Georgetown and been part of the School of Foreign Service, and getting into the sociology of nation states, we generally are very tribal as a species, but we have a tendency not to think of ourselves as tribal when it comes to we're all part of Earth. There's a certain element of that dealing with the environmental movement, but not really. But once we actually start exploring, then we start seeing ourselves as true, citizens of this planet. And I had a very long-term professor who was involved in the European Union. And now when you think about the European Union, so I'm using a parametric of not running away from our problems. Europe after World War II, got itself together to think of itself as a tribe, which has created a tremendous amount of benefit for the European countries. We can debate what's going on today. And I think if you see something like that happen, because we are exploring and thinking about ourselves as terrestrials, you'll generally not run away from your problems. And it will, I think, more naturally create a tribe of Earth citizens where we're more fighting at each other right now. I'm saying that won't stop, but it'll bring down the significant amount of strife similar to the European Union. That's the only way I can think about it. I'm an engineer, so I always think things in parametrics or break the problem down. As far as Redwire is concerned, look, that's one of the reasons why we're very committed to a global company. We get from our last Qs, we get over half our revenue from out of Europe, and we want that to continue. Obviously, the U.S. is by far the largest market for space products and infrastructure that we make. But that being said, it doesn't mean that we don't have, certain times where we're actually bringing in more global products. And I think that answers the question of, are we running away? If anything, we're running together, try and make this work.
All right. So tribes of light and tribes of darkness, right? You can be either one. Tim, I'm going to hand it over to you for the last remarks on this. Again, pick it up any way you'd like, but is there something with the billionaire class that has this ideal that might push us forward and run away from our problems, or something more ominous going to occur?
Well, I would say, it's not so much about the billionaires, and I think I agree with everyone who's talked about,
I'm thinking about the stocking stuffer again, but go ahead.
The amount of resources that we as humans spend on space is minuscule compared to what we spend on everything else we're doing. And as said, most of the space stuff is really for things on Earth, most of which is useful, like SATCOM or medicine or science, and some of which is blowing stuff up. And I guess what I would say, just to finish this off, is just thinking about historical analogies for the age of exploration or the settlement of the American frontier, or European colonialism in Africa. It's true we don't have to worry about indigenous peoples on the moon or Mars or wherever we may go, presumably, TBD. But that wasn't the only problem with the exploration of frontiers. The legal regime in space is very non-existent. And when we sent people to settle the American frontier or to go from Europe to the United States, many of them went in conditions that were, indentured servitude. Many of them died. Many of them were exploited by their corporate overlords. And so I think if we're going to talk about a world of private space settlement, and we don't need to worry about indigenous peoples, we should worry about what we are sending there. Because I do agree with the other panelists, humans are human and we're going to go places and do things, and there's not much to be done to stop that. But I do think we should think about how we're doing that. And what I haven't heard is much learning from our experiences as humans on Earth. I don't hear Jeff or Elon say, well, here's something happened that was bad during the age of exploration, but when we go to the Mars, we're going to fix that. It's more like, I think Elon has said that Mars's government will be like Twitter. Does anyone think that's a particularly compelling thing? I don't. So I will be curious to see, as the technology increases our aspirations and our ambitions, can our society keep up with it? And how will they do that? And I think that's the big question.
And it's
Yeah.
still a story to be told. Tamara,
Yes.
over to you. What a session. And I'm going to take the liberty here of saying go Irish Friday night, but and Columbus, when he came over, he didn't start Notre Dame, but they did bring Catholicism. Anyway,
Okay.
over to you, gentlemen. Thank you so much for that conversation. We could go on for hours and hours and hours, and we'll have you back. Tamara, over to you.
Over to me. Listen, everyone, I didn't mean to do that. Let's try this again. I want to thank everybody for a wonderful conversation. We are actually over time, so I'm not going to belabor the point. I'm trying desperately to get myself to be on spotlight and not everybody else. But I'm going to leave Lou here because we're going to sign off. Everyone, I want to thank Lou, and I'm going to ask you to indulge me in thanking Lou for being a able, interesting, inquisitive, and very integral part of the New York Space Business Roundtable. This is officially, but hopefully not actually, but officially, this is Lou signing off for the very last time. So please, everyone, join me in a round of
Thank
applause
you,
for
Tamara.
Lou.
Thank you.
And
All
with
right,
that, we're out.
we're out of here. Happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays, all. Take care.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.